I'd say we can kick things off. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar. It's a SuSanA WASHtech webinar on the technology applicability framework. And basically, I'll start off with maybe one or two housekeeping rules, just how we're going to do it today. We're going to keep microphones off, other than the presenters, so that we don't have any echo in the recording, and also so we have a good sound quality for all participants. Due to bandwidth restrictions, we're not going to be using webcams. And if you are having any audio problems with any time during the webinar, please send a private message to Martin, who will be happily assist you. To send messages, the chat box is down in the right-hand corner of the screen, and you can choose there with the drop-down box if you want to send private messages to folks directly. And then when it comes to questions, please send questions via chat, as many as you like, and as soon as they come up, so that we then can collect them, and then Sean will be collecting them and also be asking them as soon as the presenters have finished their presentations in the Q&A slots. So, and naturally, of course, if you have comments as we go along, those can also be put into the chat field, and then also send those to everyone, so everyone can see comments and questions that come in. And yeah, so on behalf of the SuSanA Secretary, I'd like to welcome everyone. And I'm happy to say that I have support from the technical side from Sean Furry from the SCAT Foundation. And then I think I'd like to hand it over. I'll introduce each presenter just with a one-liner before they get going. So I'd like to hand it over now for an introduction on TAF, on the Technology Applicability Framework, from Andrzej Oleszewski. So over to you, Andrzej. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Andrzej Oleszewski. I'm working at SCAT Foundation. I'm a water and sanitation expert. And in the next couple of minutes, I will present the concept of the Technology Applicability Framework, the TAF, to you. It's a tool for assessing applicability and scalability of WASH technologies. Now I try to move on the next slide. However, it's not working. Martin, may I ask you to move the slide, please? It's the end. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So the TAF was developed within the WASHtech project, an EU-funded action research project. The consortium partners were IRC, WaterAid, WSA, Trent, KNUST in Ghana, Networks Uganda, Brentford University in the UK, and SCAT. In this consortium, we had institutions from 3 African countries, Ghana, Uganda, and Burkina Faso. And my role within, or SCAT's role within this consortium, was the development of 2 tools, including the TAF. And at the end of the presentation today, I will also briefly indicate how the TAF is used today, after the WASHtech project has ended last year in December. Next slide, please. From technologies to lasting services. That's the title of this slide and the slogan of the WASHtech project. It stresses the importance of having suitable technologies that fit to the context and are adequately introduced and managed in order to provide lasting services. Within WASHtech, we use the technologies as the entry point for developing a tool which assess applicability and scalability of sanitation technologies, for example, which will finally provide lasting services. Many sanitation-related technologies, such as UDDT, do provide services in some contexts. However, the same technology might fail in a different context or introduced through a different approach. So introducing existing or even new wash technologies, also sanitation technologies, is a rather complex and resource-intensive endeavor, which needs an approach which fits to the context, and it needs dedicated engagement of many actors over a long period of time. And this is indicated in the figure where you see the timeline and the uptake of units or technologies. Based off the analysis of many case studies, can be shown that the introduction and uptake process of wash technologies can be described as a process of 3 stages. We have the orange, blue, and the green area in this graph. And the first one we call invention phase, which also can be split up into 2 sub-phases, the testing and the preparation. This is where you actually have maybe a prototype. You try this technology. There are only few numbers on the ground, little people applying this technology. And once you tested it and you agreed to launch it, you prepare, for example, the scaling up of the production line, promotion, give training, you build up the supply chain. Then hopefully the product will be taken up. You enter the tipping point, and finally you have many units providing services. You can also say that there's a maturity. We call it then the successful introduction. So next slide please. Before actors such as government or private sector engage in a long-lasting and often risky process, such as introduction of new or an existing technology, they need to know if all the effort is worth at all and which are the risky factors they have to manage. And so far there was no robust tool which allows the actors assessing upfront the applicability and scalability in a very early stage. And this is where the WASHtech project comes in and where the TAF fits. Next slide, please. The Technology Applicability Framework, we call it TAF, is a simple-to-use decision support tool for the assessment of the applicability and scalability. The target user of the TAF include and focus on local and national government, local private sector and NGOs, also international NGOs, development partners, academia. To foster innovation in the sector and to increase accountability, all sector actors are involved in the process. So we deliberately designed the TAF in a stepwise, transparent process using a participatory approach. So all actors are involved in the field visit and in the key steps of decision taking. The data we use come from desk work and field work. Next slide. The TAF uses a stepwise approach following 4 steps. The first step is called screening. The screening filters out those technologies that do not work in a specific environment, for example, for technical reasons, where the water level is too deep, or where there is often flooding, or where there is no need for this particular technology at all. But if you pass the screening, then you go to the second step, which includes a comprehensive assessment using 18 indicators. And these indicators should consider all relevant aspects of scalability and applicability. Third step includes the presentation of results, and the last and final step is about interpretation and conclusion. Next slide, please. In the TAF, 18 indicators, as I mentioned, are used for conducting a comprehensive assessment. And on the slide, you see a matrix of these 18 indicators. On the vertical axis of the matrix, there are 6 sustainability dimensions: the social, the economic, the environmental, the legal, institutional, organizational dimension, skill and knowledge, and finally, the technology itself. On the horizontal axis, you see 3 columns, and they represent the perspectives of the key actors involved in the development and in the introduction of technologies. These are the user and buyer of the technology, the producer and provider, and the third column includes the regulator, the investor of the introduction, and facilitator. For each square in this matrix, one indicator is defined. For example, if you look at the user-buyer perspective and the economic dimension, you see indicator number 4, affordability. So this indicator is about affordability from the perspective of the users to cover investment costs, but also costs for minor and major repair. By using this indicator system and the participatory process, the TAF assures that the sustainability issues concerning the introduction of this technology in a particular context are particularly addressed by the perspectives of the key actors. And additionally, by this process, all these issues perceived are shared within all participants, because all participants participate in the workshop and in the field visit. They're exposed to these issues. Next slide, please. The scoring in step number 2 is done in a workshop setting involving all actors: the user and buyer, the producer, provider, the regulator, and the facilitator. For each of these 18 indicators, one scoring question has been defined in the TAF. So the group in the workshop will go through all these 18 questions, scoring questions, and came up with one score for each single indicator. So you do this indicator by indicator through all dimensions. Start with the social dimension, number 1, 2, 3, and end up with all indicators for these 18 scores. So the group will go through all the questions. It's not a single person, it's a group process. And for the scoring, we use a simple scoring rule, which is a link to the traffic light system. You see the rule on the slide. Green means high value, positive impact, supportive characteristics, whereas red or minus is a low value, negative, hindering characteristics. And if you know there's a potential impact and follow-up is needed, we go for yellow or 0. If there is too little information to score and you have to look for this, we put a question mark. So this type of arranging the scores and presenting the scores, this allows you different entry points for presentation, as we see on the next slide. For example, you can focus on a particular perspective of one actor group, like here, regulators, investors, and facilitators. You see from their perspective, there are red dots for the social and the environmental dimension, for example. This here is just a hypothetical example, but you immediately can identify bottlenecks or risky areas where you have to follow up. The next slide, you see that you can also focus on a particular dimension, like the social aspect, and you can think about why there are 2 green dots but a red for the regulator, and link these indicators and define mitigation measures, for example, to overcome critical indicator score. Or, as indicated in the next slide, you can go for the entire slide and profile, which means you have the profile for the assessment for one technology in one region. But you can also, if you repeat the assessment for a different technology in the same context, you can start having the basis of comparing technologies. And last way of interpretation, the next slide is if you pick specific indicators which are linked to one topic, for example, operation and maintenance, you can identify particularly bottlenecks in user groups or in the producer groups or wherever, and also in particular dimensions. So we have different entry points, and they show bottlenecks, but also potential areas where the technology fits very well to the context. On the next slide, I just want to summarize where the TAF has been used and a bit on the outlook. So, as I mentioned, in the WASHtech project, which went on between 2011 and 2013, the TAF was developed and tested in 3 countries, in Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Uganda, in 3 rounds on 13 different wash technologies. This included pour flush toilet or pumps like India Mark II, the biofill toilet or Enviolu, which we will hear more details later from Benedict. The TAF has been integrated in national validation procedures in all 3 countries, and the line ministries have appointed host institutions to follow up the use of the TAF in these countries. Beyond WASHtech, there is ongoing activities in Uganda and Ghana on applying the TAF for validation on water and other new technologies. And in Nicaragua, the TAF has been used even without any external support. They just took the TAF from the website and applied it. And there we will hear Joshua Greenberg's input from Nicaragua. So the costs for applying these TAF applications, because, for example, in Uganda, the private sector wants to apply the TAF and will pay for the validation, are around $3,000 to $5,000 for one assessment for one technology in a region. These costs are mainly attributed to travel expenses, per diem, so the costs depend on the travel distance. The detailed breakdown of costs is presented in the TAF manual, which is downloadable from the resource base, which is presented on the last slide. If you want to access any documents on TAF, the TAF manual, the questionnaires, background documents, a short video produced by WaterAid on the TAF, everything is published in the public domain on www.washtechnologies.net. They can download all documents in Word or PDF, even in French. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Now I want to hand over to Benedict, or maybe before you have some questions. After me, Benedict will present the experiences from Ghana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andre, for that presentation. We haven't had any questions come in just yet, but please feel free to type them in. And yes, let's hand over to hear about some in-field experiences from Ghana, from Benedict. And so yeah, handing over to Benedict now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Good afternoon, good morning to everybody. My name is Benedict, as has been mentioned already. My presentation, I will talk briefly about how the TAF evolved in Ghana, and then I'll focus a bit on the use so far in Ghana of the TAF tool. I work with Trend Training Research and Networking for Development as the program coordinator, and then on the WASHtech project, I was the facilitator of the implementation in Ghana. Next slide. Yeah, I've done the introduction already, so we go to the next slide. Now, WASHtech implementation in Ghana was approached with the aim of ensuring that the TAF and other tools that we develop will be embedded and owned by the sector. And to be able to achieve that, we set up a core group that met at least quarterly to discuss and advise on progress of work. And the members of this core group included the implementation partners, that is Trend, Resource Center Network in Ghana, KNUST, a public university in Ghana, and WaterAid Ghana. And then also representatives from the key ministries and agencies that are tasked with the responsibility of providing WASH services and also checking on technology approvals, including the Ministry of Water Resources, Ministry of Local Government, Environmental Health and Sanitation Directorate, Community Water and Sanitation Directorate, SHEP. We also included NGOs practitioners in the WASH sector under their umbrella organization called CONIWAS. We also involved private practitioners, particularly those who are involved in technology development and consultants. Again, we had collaborations with other projects that were working on sustainable WASH delivery, including the WASH Cost project and the Triple S project. To reach out to the general sector within Ghana, we also shared a number of times on different platforms within the country, including the National Level Learning Alliance platform, the Mule Conference Series, Ghana Water Forum, and other special meetings. Next slide. In getting the whole tool accepted to the sector, we had to pilot it, as Andrew has explained. And in Ghana, we piloted it on 7 different technologies. 3 out of the 7 were sanitation technologies. The approach was to always look at the guiding questions in the TAF framework, customize the train field staff, and then go to the field to collect data. After data collection, we'll do validation, a workshop within the selected districts. And then we'll subsequently have a national scoring workshop where we'll discuss the issues and take decisions on the various indicators. And based on these decisions and recommendations, we prepare a document we call recommendations. And the ones that we have prepared on the technology that we looked at are already on the website that we mentioned. Next slide. Now, let me share with you some of the experiences that we had on the sanitation technologies that we looked at during the piloting stage. This included the pore flush toilet, Envirolu toilet, and the biofuel digester toilet. And the profile you see on the right-hand side is the results that we had with the biofuel digester and toilet. Now let's look at some of the findings that came up from assessing each of these technologies. Next slide. Now, with the pore flush, we found that the key component, that is the squat bowl, is imported, just as WC bowls are imported. And it contributed a bit to the cost. But then we realized that at the initial stages of introducing the technology in Ghana, there was an attempt to set up a local production unit, particularly of the bowl. But this process was stuck at a point. And we realized that there was still the need and the potential to look at this option, even though it will require some strategic investment in capacity building and also supply chain activities. We also might have to look at patent issues and all that. Another point that we realized was that so far the pore flush toilet has been promoted within projects that are supported with the national funds. So there hasn't been a broad-based promotion to let individuals who want to acquire sanitation technologies to go for it. And therefore, people are not even aware of how to assess the squat goods. And we also realize that as a water-based technology, it might not be so feasible in areas with acute water shortages, even though the amount of water required is minimal compared to WC. The investment cost for a household was found to be around $600 US, and we thought that was a bit beyond the affordability of the poor. And given also that there were no sanitation financing schemes that would provide some cover for the poor to be able to acquire and pay in installments. The technology can also be made more affordable if we are able to develop more cheaper superstructure options so that the poor can have a wide range of options. In terms of the Envirolu, we realized that most units that had been installed were malfunctioning because there was not a lot of technical information to users and the operational protocols were not followed. And the problem of malfunctioning was also more acute in the northern part of Ghana than the other parts of Ghana. And this is the issue that TAF wants to deal with, that we look at the viability of every technology within a particular context. No spare parts outlets were in the country, so the difficulty was that if you had a problem, particularly with the ventilation extraction unit, it has to be imported from South Africa. We also realized that the technology was initially introduced into Ghana without any formal, it didn't go through the formal process. It was politically supported, and that probably contributed to some of the problems. And we thought that that should be revisited.
So I think we must have lost Benedict there, as I can't seem to hear him anymore. Andre, can you maybe step in?
Yeah, I have the script, so I just read the slides. Sorry for this. Okay. Benedict,
please go to the biofilm digester. Next slide. The quality of effluent that comes out of the after the separation of a liquid from the solid was also not officially established, and there was no clarity or information on whether the quality of manure that comes out of the operation was also pathogen-free. And we thought that there was a need for appropriate state agencies to certify those aspects. As a new technology tool, we recommended that there should be a range of options for users so that they can meet their different needs and preferences. And we also recommended that the technology should be taken through a formal validation and adoption process. Now, next slide. Move again, please. Yep. Please, next slide. Now, let me talk about the outlook in Ghana so far. I just finished the presentation on biofuel, so we can move to the outlook in Ghana. Given that the tool is accepted in Ghana, and we have hosts when it comes to technology that are sanitation and those for water. And then also, the sector finds it as a value addition to the whole validation process because it provides a comprehensive way of looking at sustainable wash delivery through the sanitation or through technology. Trend and other implementing agencies still provide technical support to the sector on as and when basis. And based on the WASHtech working and other platforms. Now, by biofuel, the developer of the biofuel toilet has formally applied for sector validation adoption, and Trend is providing technical support as a facilitator of the process. We can get more specific information on Ghana and the TAF from www.washghana.net. Thank you very much, and I would want to take if there are some questions.
Thank you very much, Benedict, for the presentation. Sean, are there one or two questions that have come in for Benedict?
Right, well, I think the one question that came in for Andre, but I think Benedict might also want to answer, it comes from Jeremy Collett, who asks, it seems like there's a fair amount of subjectivity in selecting either a plus, a 0 or a negative for each aspect. Does the manual provide guidance for this? So perhaps start with Andre. Could you answer that one?
Yeah, I'm happy. Of course, there is subjectivity in this process, and I think there's some kind of subjectivity. The fact is, in this methodology, that we try to, let's say, deal with this subjectivity in order to make it visible, to get in all actors involved in the discussion. So if there are strong speakers or if there are particularly opinions, that these opinions are made transparent at least. And there are guidances in the TAF manual. This is, let's say, on paper, but now I would like to hand over to Benedict and maybe later also to Joshua, because they experience this very much in the practical application on how to deal with subjectivity. May I ask Benedict to come in? Thank you.
Yeah, the issue of subjectivity is dealt with when you also allow participation of all stakeholders. And one critical issue to deal with that is also have a very unbiased facilitation. In the process of doing the validation and the scoring workshop, we also make sure that we document all the suggestions that are coming up. And it's based on those suggestions from all the participants that you say green or amber or red. Again, we're not talking about the tip today, but we link the tip
Benedict, we seem to have lost your audio again. Okay, I think this is Trevor speaking again. I think we will continue. And when Benedict comes back, perhaps in the last answering questions session after Joshua's presentation, we can then revisit the question or the answer from the end of the answer from Benedict. Thank you very much, Benedict, for the presentation. I'd like to now hand over to Joshua, who's going to speak about WaterAid's experience in Nicaragua with TAF. So over to you, Joshua. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Trevor. Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Greenberg. I'm the country manager for WaterAid's program in Nicaragua, and I'm going to present our experience with an application of the TAF methodology to a core flush toilet option in the context within which we are working in Nicaragua. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we are working in a very remote area in the northeast part of the country. Difficult access, conditions of a limited supply chain, majority indigenous and multilingual population, and we're working in both a rural and peri-urban interventions, which I'll explain a little bit more in the next slide, or following that. So the product that we chose to look at with this first experience in applying the methodology is a core flush toilet, which was a modification of something that was introduced fairly recently and was adopted at the national government level for a period of time as the solution to be implemented in the country through their national programs. And we were applying it in this region, where the national programs rarely reach, but and we were looking at the potential for the sustainability of it in that context, and also in the context of after it had been introduced, there was a previous study that was conducted, a typical study done by a consultant with a technical aspect of field field study and a social acceptance component. It had two components to it. And the result of that study created a certain degree of paralysis in the WASH sector in the country, because some of the findings were thought to be negative, and the sector really had a hard time then knowing how to deal with it. So we decided to choose this and to look at it and to apply the TAF methodology, finding that it offered a lot of opportunities to delve into the sort of grayer areas and to bring in a wider range of, bring in all of the stakeholders and to have a more open discussion about the technology itself and how it was being applied. So this is just a scheme of how it's being done here in the context of the Caribbean coast of the country, and the initial installed cost, including enclosure, ranges up to about $450. Of that, about $150 is the technology itself, or the component itself of the system. The rest tend to be the enclosure costs and some additional transportation, depending on where it's being implemented. And the next slide, please. So our approach to introducing this technology has been twofold, and it's in this context that we wanted to assess it. One is at a community base in rural villages, and this involves the training of sanitation promoters that are able to build and install the technology, and with an initial priority being focusing on people with physical limitations, physical disabilities, elderly and handicapped, in terms of their access to sanitation. And we're working primarily in communities that had less than 20% access to sanitation and a very high level of open defecation practice. And this technology offers the opportunity to integrate the sanitation into the home, and that creates access it should create access for all. That's one aspect of the context. And the next slide. And we are also working in the peri-urban areas on a full sanitation marketing approach with no subsidy, working on developing a financing scheme with a microfinance institution, which is a partner, and also have been working on product development across in the supply chain, and we've been doing some collaboration there with the World Bank WSP program, and also looking at the suppliers themselves of the components of the system. Next slide. So our motivation for applying the framework, of course, is always the search for sustainability. We are also within this two-pronged approach. One is a partial subsidy in the community, but obviously looking to how this can be scaled up at the community level in, as I said, again, very remote environments with a very extremely limited supply chain, and also in the market-based context with zero subsidy. The other motivation was that we were finding some promising evidence on the ground, and this contrasted somewhat with the mixed results or the paralysis in the sector that we were finding as a result of a previous evaluation that was limited to the technical functioning of the system and its acceptability. And we wanted to get beyond that, and we saw the opportunity of this framework for the bringing in all of the stakeholders, and this was something that we thought was an excellent potential to moving and finding solutions and finding where the weak points are in terms of scaling up or evaluating and getting to a national acceptance, and also a regional or a context-based assessment of the option. Next slide, please. So the process we went through was probably a little bit more expedited than it was applied in the three countries the three case study countries that were part of the WASHtech project. We put together a facilitation team which was composed of WaterAid, Weltungerhilfe, which is a German INGO with presence in the area that we're working in, and one of the local universities. We downloaded and studied the manuals. The manuals, we were dealing with them in English first, and we haven't yet translated to Spanish, which is the official language in this region in Nicaragua. But we managed to share them amongst our team and the team of the facilitation team in English. And then we had to go through the process of translating the questions, the guiding questions and the key questions. And in that process, we were able to adapt the questions for their application, their specific application to the technology that we were going to do that to. We found that to be a fairly easy process. And in the case of the user questionnaire, we translated that as well to the predominant local mother tongue, which is Mosquito. And for the other two, we left them we got them as far as Spanish. That tends to be the language that's used commonly amongst what would be the producers, providers, and regulators, the other stakeholders. We prepared materials for applying this in the field. As I said, we adapted the methodology and we applied it. Part of the application itself was done entirely in the field. There was a session on the questions, the guiding questions for the producers or providers, and that we had some complications in that in terms of we ended up deciding that at this stage of the role of producer or provider was composed of the organizations, in this case INGOs, that have and local NGOs that have promoted the technology. We did that because, and this is one of the issues when you get into sanitation technologies that are made up of a number of components, and there is not yet someone that packages them together and is selling them. So we have providers that produce and provide or supply components of the whole system. But and that's an issue that was highlighted in this, and it's obviously something that we are working towards in the marketing approach, is to be able to develop that capacity and have service providers that sort of package up the entire technology. It was conducted, the workshop itself was conducted in the field. Previous to the workshop, we had the benefit of a study that we conducted on the technical aspects of the technology that was already in place, whether it was functioning, what some of the weaknesses were in the functioning of that, and also a social study of the acceptance generally across a range of users that were already have the technology in place. And that information from that study, which was conducted in coordination with a local university, was shared with the participants in the workshop, which was conducted in the field. The workshop conducted in the field comprised users and local regulators from the local government authorities and central government institutions, and the NGOs which have been involved in the promotion of the technology. Next slide. So as I said, it was conducted in the intervention area. The users were broken into groups to get the input and assessment from groups of men, groups of women, and groups of adolescents from multiple communities. The regulators, the producers, providers, as I explained previously, that role was substituted at this stage by INGOs with a previous session. So we already had the results of that. We presented the technologies, and then we had a 2-hour session separated into groups to go through the guiding questions and to respond to reach a consensus on how to respond to the key question. In that step, and in response to one of the questions about the subjectivity of this, the orientation was to reach a consensus amongst the groups, and there were differences of opinions between the different groups of users, between the opinion and the perspectives of men and perspectives of women and perspectives of adolescents. At some stage there was divergence, and I think that was an important part of the process. At the end, all of the results were shared once the scoring system was determined. We tended to leave in the user column the options of if there were differences of opinion between the subgroups of users, and then after the presentation, an analysis of it and conclusions and recommendations were drawn on as to what we needed to do further investigation and further work. Next slide. Just going the overall impressions of the process. One is firstly, we found it very easy to apply, including the preparation of the facilitator team. The only comment on that would be the facilitator team to really be able to draw out the key findings has to ensure that some of the key questions, some of the guiding questions can turn into very critical issues, or critical issues are raised by some of the guiding questions, as opposed to others which have less important responses. And so those needed to be highlighted and to be taken note of to assist in the analysis post following the scoring, because once you reach a consensus on the key guiding question, but there's some of the guiding questions that provide real insight into into things that need to be looked at in greater depth. It was easy to adapt and translate. It was very easy to understand the process at the stakeholder level, at all levels, and there was really great engagement in the process. The scoring system quickly identifies the weak points, and especially where the question marks come up or the zero scoring comes up, it really identifies where there are weak points, especially in the environmental regulations. It brings out quite clearly where the local authorities are weak, often in terms of knowing what the regulations are and what should be applied, and so that's something that's shared and that I think promotes going back with them to ensure that regulations are being met and the legal framework as well. So it brings out some of the weaknesses that are in the sector, highlights those, and provokes greater efforts to ensure clarity in those areas. The sessions themselves are an extremely effective trigger for cross-stakeholder discussion and debate in relation to, very participatory in the relation to the sustainability of the technology, especially in this case where there was very high user acceptance, but then on the financial side there was still a lot of questions, and especially once you start talking about introducing the life cycle costs. So it's a great forum for bringing out the issues of life cycle costs and having cross-stakeholder discussions about how those can be met, or how those can be overcome when there is a significant demand for the technology. Again, I touched on the producer-provider role can be less clear in sanitation technology packages, which come from multiple sources, and is something that, as we move forward, we'll need to work on and bring in as we bring in more private sector to actually package up the technologies in the market-based approach. And as Andre mentioned, we considered it to be a very low-cost process, essentially the transportation cost. Again, it's all relative to where you are and how big of a context region that you are addressing. But the process itself it doesn't require many more inputs other than the time of the participants and the transportation cost to reach the location. And the time itself to go through the whole process is relatively quick to reach conclusions. Next slide, please. So just a few recommendations. Again, we thought that the different groups of users is something important that we applied, and it should be standardized or systematized in the process. I think the second point has already been dealt with. There was a question, and the second point, I think it's been dealt with in by the people that have developed all the manuals, and it's been addressed, so that I think is no longer necessary. And it is important to prepare the facilitator team prior to the workshop, primarily to ensure that they are able to take note of the responses to some of the secondary questions which are used and highlight which of those have brought out key issues that then can be lost when you get to the final scoring, so that those are taken note of. I think I also I also thought that another recommendation at some point, which occurred to me now, was that the analysis, the post-scoring analysis, it would be useful to have some kind of a digital tool to be able to easily digitalize the results of the scoring and then be able to share them at a wider level. It just could be something easy, seeing as the scoring system so easy that there could be a tool to just put out the result of every scoring process and then be able to share that across. Otherwise, we'd have that primarily in photos at this stage. Next slide. This would be the results that we had. As you can see, there we have two columns in the user group, and we applied this in two sessions, two different contexts, micro contexts, and so you'll see there in the economic side that in this case of the male participants had a negative response to the economic side, whereas the female participants thought that they needed more information, and they didn't discard it. The economic aspects of the technology, they didn't immediately discard it as impossible. Last slide, I think, is the next one. These are just photos, as you can see, from the woman on the top. It's a very engaging process that people get very involved in it, which I think is extremely positive. And I think that's it. I think the last slide is just next steps. We're moving on as a group to address the weaknesses and adjust the approach for introducing the technology and reopening the debate at a wider level, at the national level, to break the paralysis, in this case, in the search for dignified, accessible, and sustainable options. And also taking into account the concept of the sanitation ladder, so that technology may have some weaknesses, and yet it may be represent a step on the ladder. We're revisiting the supply chain to determine the opportunities for ensuring the economic feasibility of scaling up and the packaging, really, of the technology, and we intend to apply the approach and the methodology to other products that form part of the context of the water and sanitation marketing approach. So road pumps being very main highly used technology in Nicaragua, but again, contextualizing that, the real scalability of that in this remote region is an issue, and other technologies that we think this approach is an excellent way to engage the stakeholders across the board. So those are the next steps that we plan to take here.
Thank you very much, Joshua, for that great presentation and the insights into using the TAF tool without having a training workshop to begin with. I'm just looking at time. We've gone a little bit over time. We have had a couple questions come in. Joshua, Benedict, and Andre, do you still have, say, another, let's say, 5 minutes maximum just to field these questions, or shall we call it?
I think if there are some
more burning questions, I would be happy to respond to those. Otherwise, those asked already, I think we can provide very quick feedback written in the forum if this is fine for the audience, because time has moved on. This would be my proposal to feed in the forum of SuSanA.
Joshua, would you be happy with that? Just considering time, as a couple questions have come in directly to you here through the chat box.
Yeah, that's fine. I can either respond to them afterwards, or yeah, that's either is fine with me.
Okay, great. Then I would propose that that we call the webinar to an end. We close it. I just want to wrap up with one or two sentences, and then I did post in the chat link. I posted a link to the SuSanA forum where the announcement and a little bit of pre-discussion to the WASHtech to this webinar took place. And what I'll do then is take the questions that have not been answered and place them there in the forum, and then get Joshua, Andre, and Benedict then to answer them there in the forum. I'll facilitate that process. So just a few wrapping up, one or two sentences from myself as chair. It comes out very clearly that the TAF is a participatory process and can get the users engaged, as well as fitting to the respective context, which is I think the powerful side of the tool. And then of course that it's both easily communicatable to those that use it, as illustrated by Joshua, as well as the results are then also easily communicatable through the traffic light system, etc. And I think it's nice to see that it's adaptable and usable by folks that have not been maybe involved in the process as heavily as Benedict and Andre. So that was great to hear that through your presentation, Joshua. And then from Benedict's perspective, I see that the fact that it's institutionally anchored in Ghana, as the one example that was discussed today, is also great and shows that this tool is hopefully or potentially here to stay. And so I think that was my few sentences. And with no further ado, I'd like to say thank you to all that attended. And we will share the link again in an email to everyone. And we'll look into making the video available or recording available of this webinar. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening. Goodbye.
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 Bye.